Joe Manchin, as of right now, is the only Senate Democrat that is not supporting the For the People Act. Now, others are effectively opposed to it because they allow the filibuster to continue, which, so long as it's there, means we won't get it. But Joe Manchin goes beyond that. He's not only supporting the filibuster, he literally doesn't support the bill. He supports the John Lewis Voting Act, which also Republicans will filibuster and don't support, even though he thinks that's some sort of bipartisan thing. But anyway, what is he potentially willing to negotiate on to put together some sort of bill that will combine the interests of two different parties? One is the American people who elected a president and a Senate and some dude from West Virginia. Well, here is what we might end up getting. We have this three-page memo being circulated by his office last week, which indicates his willingness to support some key provisions of the For the People Act, including provisions mandating at least 2 weeks of early voting and measures meant to eliminate partisan gerrymandering of congressional districts. So let's start off there with what he's okay with, because that is, it's impossible to exaggerate how not the entirety of the For the People Act that actually is. But those are two good things. Early voting is good, and getting rid of partisan gerrymandering would be, it would be so big that I honestly don't know what the actual ramifications of that would be for the composition and representation in government. So those two things, 2 weeks of early voting, getting rid of gerrymandering. Viviana, what do you think about those? If we got those, would you be satisfied?
That's a start, but I mean, you haven't gotten to the voter ID issue, and that's the biggest one for me.
You want the negatives? Okay, let's throw the negatives in
well,
there
because
too.
It's such a big negative. It kind of like, it's not even gonna make a difference. I mean, if you stop people from voting, then the gerrymandering doesn't really even matter.
Yeah, that's not a bad point. Okay, let's start with the negatives. Manchin's memo also sketches out several provisions that have historically been opposed by most Democrats, including backing an ID requirement for voters. So, by the way, let's throw in also the ability of local election officials to purge voter rolls using other government records, which is a great way to take people off the voting rolls who should be on there. If you want to get rid of a community, generally black voters, that's a great way to do that. And so it's awesome that Joe Manchin is pushing for that. Now, the other one is the voter ID. And let's be very clear here. Voter ID is a Republican goal. And the Republicans were not able to get it federally, even when they had unified control of government. But now, with the Democrats having unified control, they might get it, thanks to Joe Manchin. Isn't that twisted? Like Trump and the Republicans, when they had the Senate and the House, they didn't pass some sort of federal voter ID law. But now, after multiple elections, the Democrats saying, no, we don't want that stuff. Now, finally, it might be required to get some sort of bill passed, Viviana.
I more and more, I feel like Joe Manchin is going to try to run for president. He is really pushing himself as I'm not saying he has a chance, but there really isn't somebody that is trying to sort of appease both sides as much as Joe Manchin. He's this ultra centrist Democrat, which I don't even know what that means. But he's really trying to work on both sides of the fence here, and it's not working for me. And I mean, you and I are much more progressive than most Democrats ever will be. But it's upsetting because this guy is really putting a wrench in the works, and it's going to be devastating for Americans and their right to vote. I was looking up some statistics from the ACLU, and it says millions of Americans, 11% of US citizens. More than 21 million Americans do not have a government issued photo. And every time voter ID laws are brought up, they really trump up, no pun intended, that people are out there trying to vote illegally when it's just not true. And so this is that's why I said like the gerrymandering, like if you're gonna control that, but you're gonna require voter ID, you're gonna eliminate that population anyway. Yeah. We live in a metropolis, so it is a little bit easier for us to access some of the documents that we need to get an ID. But even people who experience homelessness, here in Los Angeles, have trouble getting their birth certificates. You have to pay for that. All of these different things that you need to get your ID. People just shrug, well, you have to have a license anyway. Well, some IDs are considered okay and some aren't. Like you can't use a student ID, but you could use a utility bill. I mean, sometimes you rent a room and you don't have.
You can use your gun license, right?
You can use your gun license, absolutely. And you can bring a gun in there, but you can't. you can't just say this is my address and this is my name. And it's really, for me, that's the pinnacle here. If you start forcing voter ID laws, you're really gonna isolate a lot of Americans, and particularly rural, poor Americans.
Well, two quick things. One, I get what you're saying about voter ID. The one silver lining is that that stat that you said about people not having photo ID, at the very least, silver lining, that is evenly distributed across all demographic groups. It's not chosen as a thing because it clearly discriminates against certain types of people than others. I'm being sarcastic. It obviously not even. The other thing though is, here's a silver lining for you. So it's long been insane that you can use things like a hunting license or something. No, Mr. Unknown is literally preempting what I'm about to say. That you can use something like a hunting license as a voting license. But Texas, you dummies, you're taking away the need to have a license at all, which means you're gonna be taking away the need for them to have this thing they could use for voting. You fools, you zaps. No, the joke is really on us because they're still gonna stop people from voting and they're gonna be better armed now. But anyway, the Joe Manchin stuff is terrible. This is what you should get under a Republican. And let's not even get into exactly. The fact that, well, where's the public financing? He doesn't support it. Where's the increased disclosure for dark money campaign donations? He doesn't support that, so that's not in this. This is so narrow. Some of the provisions are good, yes.
It was 3 pages, John. It was a 3-page memo. It was a 3-page memo. He really thought this one through. And the good stuff
was this on the 3-page memo. Here's all the things 10 things I hate about voting rights. That's what I would title the movie about Manchin. But anyway, yeah, hopefully they will shoot this down. I don't know what in the end will come of this, but I don't want Manchin to be an important part of the process. I'm getting really sick of it.
I feel like I need to say that one quote from Blazing Saddles. Badges? We don't need no stinking badges. Because who gets asked for their ID? It's not the blonde, blue-eyed person that shows up. Oh, I forgot my ID, but this is my address. Sure, Susie, come on in. No, that's not the one.
That is true. That's true. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.